and how to begin. As I said, I think it's Frankfurt. I could be wrong. Well, you've got this amazing building, could be a town hall or even a basilica. I'm not sure, as I say, but I'm going to take it on. And I see this shape here. This is my first shape. It's like a bell. It's like a bell. And if I sit this bell on a box, this is the easiest way in I can think of. So here's the box. So forget about, don't even worry about perspective for now, because I know perspective terrifies some people. So try not to worry about that and think about a box in your bottom right-hand corner. And if you look, it comes up about halfway on your page. So, and it's about 2/5 of the size of the right hand. So how does that work out? Well, you'll find something that fits 5 times. Once, twice, 3, nearly went into song there. 4, something like that, 5. So if I now go back and I'll find 2/5, there it is. And remember, it's coming up to around about halfway, a little bit lower maybe. So there's the first sort of plinth box. I'm going to take my paper down actually, because otherwise it's just going to keep moving around. So I'll do that first. Sorry about the noise. So it's a slightly wider format than normal, but I'm going to try and see if I can squash and squeeze this one, because it still will work. It will just look a little bit different. Okay, so on top of this box, therefore, I'm going to put a bell. Like so. And a bell really is another box, but with sort of curved shoulders, like so. That's a really easy way into the right-hand side. Once you've done that, then you need to leave a small amount of space in the center for the square, the main square there, by the look of it. And let me just try a different color because blue's not showing up so well. Try red. Red's good. And for this, I'm going to do another plinth. This time, I would say a little bit smaller, maybe 2/5 of the way up vertically. So I'm not going to bother measuring it. I'm just going to do it by eye. But remember to leave this small shape in the middle here so that the eye can travel towards the light. Because this, part of the charm of this vista, I mean, there's so much to it, but part of the charm is the way the light seems to travel through the main square and through the buildings. Of course, back in that time, the planners, the architects, they knew all about how to create something of magnificence like this. So I'm trying to capture that light coming through from the square, and then the silhouettes in front, they will just be captivating. That's what I'm hoping. We will see. And then, of course, if we look, there's another church or major building there that's sitting on top of this plinth. So I put another plinth on top of the plinth, and that's how I'm going to deal with the sort of progression visually. And then I just stick another bell on the top, just like that. And it wouldn't matter if you were doing, you know, Frankfurt, London, Washington. You can do it the same way. And what's very interesting about the photograph, of course, is it's contre-jour, which means it's against the light, which interestingly, because this is about 1870, something like this, it's one of the first film footage, I would have thought. So what the photographer has done, or cinematographer has done, is used what the artist would do and put the light behind the scene. So they get this wonderful depth. And that's why I'm drawn to it like a moth, because I just see the light. So there we are. We've got this progression now of a right-hand side with the big box and a bell, the left-hand side with a slightly smaller box with a smaller box on top of that again, and then a bell. And that's the beginning. That's really the beginning. And then after this, it doesn't get any harder, actually. We've pretty much divided it the way we should do it. But then we have to think of the progression through to the horizon. So I'll change color now. The horizon is about, well, it's a bit higher than halfway up the screen, isn't it? And you don't really see the horizon. It's beautifully captured. It just disappears, melts into the scene. So I'm going to guess that it's just about there. So that gives me an idea of my horizon. And then I'm going to pick off, almost like, cherry picking, all of those spires and domes that we're seeing going off into the distance. There's several, there's half a dozen of them. And I'm going to start off using green this time, so that I know I picked them all off. This one here, this one is slightly different proportions. It's longer and thinner. And it's very close to this one. So all we need to know is it doesn't peak very much above the horizon. And that's the grace of this one, because it all just gently tends to fade out nicely in succession. And then the next one, slightly higher, actually. It's quite a prominent one, this one, I guess. And it's very close to the center line here, slightly left of center. A little bit like a gherkin, it's sort of popping at its nose above the horizon that I've conjured for you. It's not really there, but I guess it's somewhere close. And then there's this one, much wider dome, beautiful span, that one, with a small cupola on the top. So yeah. There it is, a little bit wider. Tiny little cupola on the top, like so. And then, of course, you've got some of the industrial aspects, which I like as well. The chimneys, kind of reminiscent of, say, something that Lowry would do. You've got the chimneys here, there. Maybe that's about it. Not too industrial. It's certainly no Manchester, is it? Although Manchester's beautiful too. So there's my chimney there. But you see, what these things do is they just give you, they're like jewellery. They give the eye something to rest at, like in music. We need that little moment to appreciate the different array. And different shapes, different textures. This is what's also very charming. So there's the background, and not, I'm not going to go too much more difficult than I need to there. And all of this will be of a similar value, sort of a tea coffee value. There does look like there's a sort of triangular structure there, spire of some sort. I'll put that in as well. Anything else? Not really at the moment. Things which we could draw, we could also create with a brush stroke. So when it comes to that sort of, I'll get, we can create, can we do it with a brush? Should I do it with a pencil? When it really gets to that nitty gritty, I'd decide then I'll just brush mark that in. But then there's this shape here. So I will go into this one with a dark blue, because this is now going from tea to coffee thickness. This is it's not quite a light middle value now. It's going towards a middle value. And I will join this shape into this grouping here. Do you see it? There's a group of buildings. And look, this group here has chimney stacks sitting on the top. And that sort of is perhaps the second row of structures. So I bring this along and just keep it very simple. You don't need to go outside box shapes. They really are box shapes, luckily. And when we get down to here, there's a gate here. One of those is probably an archway to come into the square. I kind of get a feeling it's got that classical look. It's got a little bit of a triangular sort of, like the Parthenon. It's got that kind of, like a Rolls-Royce radiator grille. It's got that shape. And then back up to here, we'll meet that other building. Got to give a little bit of space for things to come, but I just put that little box here, something there. And there I am. So I'm gradually coming forward to the square. Now the square is here. So as I've just drawn, that's my archway. I think that's an arch there. Well, at least I'm going to make it into an arch. And then there's the silhouette then of the arch bringing us into the square. And look, there's a tree. It even had room for a beautiful tree standing there on its own. Just there. So I'm going to put the tree in. And that's got a wonderful shadow shape cast across the ground. So there's my tree. So you can see how little by little we're coming forward back into this place we started. Now, as we come forward, there's so many different alternative methods you could use. You could go into particular shapes of domes and spires. I would hold on though. I would wait, because there's more to be gleaned from this particular contre-jour photograph. If we look here, there is, maybe I need to go back into red. Let's just use red again. There's a shape that's so easy to pick off, and it will make such a big difference if we can get this shape. So you have a roof shape. There you go. And do you see how easy that is to translate? It's going to be like a line that runs, slopes upwards, then backwards, and then you have this gable triangular shape here. That's great because so much of that is just dark shapes that it'll be a joy to paint. And then, as if you're using Matisse's scissors, I would urge you to then cut that silhouette shape down like so. And another little box underneath it. So that could almost be like a little head of a gecko. And there's his shoulder, that's his back, and that would be his tail. And you see how I'm sort of creating basic shapes? That's what they are. But combining triangles, rectangles together. We will have to come to perspective at some point. And I know some of you are really good with perspective, so that's not going to be an issue for you. And some of you will struggle with this, but now you've got the gable end of that building, go to the point at the apex and create the light shape. You see there? And the light shape really follows the same tilt as the gecko's nose. So it's this shape. And maybe 1 minute past the hour for the ridge of the roof, because that's what we're looking at. And there we are. It's a very big building, whatever that is, probably a very old hotel or something. Huge. So there's the roof. There's also the pitch of the roof going that way. And so that leads the eye to the silhouette. Now there's chimney stacks and all sorts of little bits of jewelry we can add later, but that's my basic shape on this side. Right, well, hope that's helped you there. But of course, what happens very quickly is my photograph gets cluttered with lines. So I would like to erase that now. So I think it will help. So I clear that, there it goes. And why did I do that? Well, because now I can focus on another area, which will be really useful. So you've got this silhouette, you know where that one is, but immediately behind it, if you really simplify, and this is what I urge you to do. And you know, for some people, it's really hard to simplify. For me, it's my automatic, you know, it's easier for me to go simple than it is to go difficult. But for some people, that is a challenge. So I do understand, but look, I'm just trying to make that simple shape there. And it's very similar to what we've just drawn in a way, but it's behind it. So this shape, it sort of, if you think about that gecko idea, this is another long, thin back, goes across the top. And then we've got this little finial shape. It's really rather decorative, but it's a triangle again, basically, coming down like so. So that's my attempt at what I'm seeing. What I'm actually seeing is far more intricate, but if I keep it simple, who knows, maybe I can add a little bit more later if I've got the time. But if not, it'll still work as a silhouette, you will see. Well, I hope you'll see. So there it is. So that's, and I've gone a little bit heavier with my pencil line there. I think that will help you if you see these are quite faint. And as I'm going forward, I'm giving it a bit more emphasis, training my eye to know where I'm looking. That's kind of my philosophy, if that's a good way of seeing it. Okay, so that's taking care of this area. I've got my square, I've got my tree. Now we just cherry pick again, and we'll pick off some easy shapes for now, okay? And then we'll have a review of that. So down here, you'll see there's a spire. It's gorgeous. Look at that. I mean, wow. Straight down. So it comes to the sort of side of this building here. It's close to the entrance arch to the, maybe I'll bring the arch over a little bit. Now I've got my tree in, I can kind of give this arch a bit more of a closer position. And then from the arch going down, I create a plumb line, almost like a very long antenna. And then to the antenna at the base here, so I'll just clear off what I've got, because look at that shape. It's got, reminds me of kind of a Russian onion on the top of a church. It's got that feel to it. And then below it, more detail. And that's going to look really fantastic with a silhouette tone. Like so. So you see how I just sort of nibbled away at the light shape. Do you see that this is like almost a perfect silhouette, but then it has side light. So you have these little shapes that you can draw them in if you wish. I just nibble them away as if I was using Matisse's scissors. I'm probably not anywhere near as accurate as he would be, but it's still going to work, because what that does, you see, the alternative is you create a symmetrical shape, which would work, but it doesn't. It looks very illustrative, and if you just shear away at the light shapes, just nibble them away as if they weren't there, it works better, you'll see. So I've got that one in, that's nice. And let's now pick off the next one, and we move onwards that way. So where do we go to next? Well, look at this one here. This is phenomenal. It makes me wonder how they built these things and how long it might have taken. It's difficult enough to draw, but I think of this as a domino. There it is. So there's two squares. That's a domino, isn't it? You see what I mean? There's a domino. And then on top of that, an arch or a little dome. So I'm going to bring out the domino shape, first of all. And the domino is not so silly, really, because it does sound a bit silly, but it's good because what it does is it tells you that the second part of the domino has that long arched window there. So I just draw that in as I go. And if I could go back to 1870, imagine, that would be amazing. But it would be exactly the same way I would draw this. You know, I would just start with the basic domino shape, put the little dome on the top, put the little window into the top of that second domino shape, and now I can have a go at drawing the finial on top with all of those little details, like little dots. It's amazing. And that's going to be fun when we come to paint that, see. Now, that's going to be so intricate. Now, once you've got that, then your reward is you get to do the one over here. There's another one. In fact, there's 3 of them that we can see. There's probably 4. One's hidden around the other side. But just to make it easy for you, again, I'm just going to make the domino idea visible. There it is. This time, because of the perspective, we're slightly around to the right, looking at this, and it's slightly going away from us to the right. So this domino is higher up, ever so slightly. How do I know that? Well, if I put a perspective line in, and I didn't want to trouble you with perspective, but it's always good to see it, even if you have problems with perspective. But there's a tilt going from there to there. And we can also put a line going from, I can get it to correlate, there to there. And you see now we're at eye level. So whoever took this photograph was at, or this film, was at eye level to this, because these 2 domes, they are the same height. So I can make that one the same height. But this one is slightly taller there, further away from me. Because one gets the feeling that these are either corner of this basilica. Like a cross shape. And then I just draw the little finials on the top. Now, if you exaggerate the finials a little bit, you know, or you shrink them down, it will still work. And I would emphasize this sort of beautiful, these little curves that they've got. I think they work well certainly in watercolor. And once you've done those 2, then of course you've got the one that's sort of peeping through the gap here. And now you've had a little bit of time to draw 2 of them. The third one, I think it wouldn't cause you major problems, I'm hoping. Could be wrong, but good luck with it, because this one's just a little domino with an even smaller little dome on the top because it is further away. And then you've got another very charming finial on the top. And this is actually what really drew me to this scene, the light coming through these silhouetted shapes. So many in one area. It's just amazingly grandiose and detailed, isn't it? And you would think, oh, well, I can't do that. I wouldn't be able to do that because it's just too much. But you can see now you can do it, and it's not as troublesome as you'd think. But what's the key is you need a great photograph. You need or if you're sitting there with your easel, you need a position against the sunlight. You need to have that light, and the sun's low. So I think this is late afternoon or very early morning. I couldn't really guess because I wasn't there, but it's that sort of time because of the stretch of the shadows, and the sunlight is over on the right, somewhere behind this basilica over that way, or in front of it, really, that side, the other side. And what it does is it creates these stark contrasts, which work really well for us. So far, we're doing great. Now, you've managed to do these 3 sort of finials on the, side of the church there. Let's have a look at the dome now, with a little bit more detail. So I'm going to clear off my shapes that I've drawn. Now, when we look at this dome, well, it's got tiers of detail. There's one there, there's another one there, and then there's another one there. Then we've got this little platform up here, which sits on top, the sort of crowning glory, this little, or rather large finial again, cupola. So I'm going back down to the bottom there. I'm going to draw this sort of shoulder line in. And then another one. So I just break it down, because it is quite detailed. I just break it down to manageable shapes. Again, if you don't get the exact shape of that dome, don't worry, it will still work. And it kind of tricks you. You see that one over there? Well, that is sort of a Romanesque. It's half a semicircle, but this one is not. There's more to it. It looks like it is, but it isn't. So, but you can start it off as a sort of a semicircle, if that helps you. It kind of looks like, at this point, it looks more like a sort of an observatory. But then you have to then cut, as if it was an egg, cut the top off there, flatten it a little bit, and then on top of that, then you can sit this little platform. And then onto the platform, then you can put, as if you're thinking about where the center line is, that's a very good idea. So there's your plumb line. And then into that, you build, you draw your cupola, which is like a long, tall candle or something. Now, you can't really see what it, you know, is on top of that. So I'm just kind of leaving it there. But what I will do is when I come to paint this, I will be tweaking this with little jewels of, you see, there's so much on there. Look at these little balls at the end and little triangles and things. I'm not gonna, you know, I don't need to draw them. You can just sort of make them out where they are, because later on I can paint that as long as I remember. That's my great problem. But when you get focused on that area, you'll see it's very likely that you'll be looking for those little shapes. So I look at that now and I think, well, maybe I went a bit narrower than the real thing, but it still is working. Now there are some sculptures here, so they're probably reminds me of Santa Maria della Salute, where you've got the hundreds of saints sculpted around the colonnade of the, you know, around this central belt. And so I'm going to draw that in. I like that. That's something different. And it kind of gives the eye something fuzzy around the edge of that, because otherwise it's just a very prescriptive circular form, and that can be a little bit, you know, strangely enough, can be a little bit boring, believe it or not. But with all these sort of, do you see these little lines here, these curves going into the belt at the top, that's going to change things dramatically. Suddenly the eye follows not only the sort of rhythm of that curve, but then another curve, and then it automatically, like it's being trained, the eye is then pulled to this curve, and then this one. And you see there's a sort of a magic going on. It's kind of a little bit hypnotic. And then what will happen then is, once you've gone around there, then we have these little windows, these little portals here, which then give the eye something else. And there's a side view of one there. It sort of pops out like a little thorn. So I'm going to put those in. And I can't think of too many basilicas or domes as majestic as that I can't really. So there it is. And there's the little one at the side. And it becomes important later when you paint it, you'll see. So there it is. I mean, something that you would think, I would have thought, oh, that's going to be just out of my league at the moment. But there it is. So we now have an amazing vista. Can we pull any more out of this? And yes, I believe we can, because if you followed this so far, you're going to get there. But I'm going to have a quick break just to check, see how you're doing. But before I do that, now you've done this one, that was really the most difficult aspect. Let's see about this one here. And there we go. This one's a little bit more sedate. There we are. It's just a box. They're all just boxes, aren't they? With a dome on the top. And this one really is more of a semicircle. And then on top of that, in the middle, a nice little bell tower that's not too troublesome, but it balances things up, and that's good because you need something after all of that to lead the eye back. So we'll pause there for a moment, and then in the second part of the drawing, because this one really has elements which need more thinking about, but in the next part, we're going to look at how the street view here that we're seeing from above, we're seeing perspective, which will lead our eye along this line. So we'll really start to abstract these light shapes as a shape that's going to lead the eye. Very much like, believe it or not, that sunlit roof leads the eye as well. It kind of leads the eye. So does this, what's going on here. But as I say, I'll come back to that. Just going to pause briefly. So I'm going to pause the video as well. Okay, so we now seem to have very strong right, left, and then the eye needs to be guided to the center here where the light is going on. So one of the big issues could be that there's quite a bit of light on the left-hand side, abstract shapes behind chimney stacks, along the side of the walls, along the side of the roof. These could divert the eye. So we've got to be careful there, because we really want the eye, and this is the challenge for us. How do we get the eye to follow the space in the square? How do we get it to go there? Well, the way I think we can do that is to use perspective. And so I'm going to show you how I interpret, and all artists may have a different way into this. So this is just how I would do it. But I think some artists might do a similar thing. I'm looking at this line. This is a separation point of the wall plane from the roof plane on this building that's leading the eye down this amazing street here. So my red arrow is showing you there's the street, and this line we need to put in as a tilt from the corner on the right and we need to sort of bring it, and it's pointing towards our tree. So if you draw your tree in the right place, if not, then we've got a problem. But don't worry. It's pointing towards the tree, and it's what do you think? 18, 19, 19 minutes past the hour. So I just draw up that line, 19 minutes past the hour. That's a good place to start. Now, if you look, just as you'd expect to see, and I'll draw this in blue, there's a side street going back this way between the buildings. Now, that will give us the roof in the light. So that's a triangle here. And then there's a space. So that'd be dark because that's going back down into the street levels. And then we have this, I'm going to draw it in green. It's a rectangle. It's like the top of the roof. Oh, didn't draw that very well. So I'll try that again. But the roof here looks kind of flat. That space there. So I'm going to draw that space as if it's flat, like so. And that's before I start to put details in front of it. So I know that these two spaces are light. Okay, that's the starting point. So if you can get that notched in, and then we can then jump to the next light shape, because you know, you can imagine if this was I'm just trying to think of imagine that you could sort of, like Tom Cruise in a movie, he could jump from one building to the next, couldn't he? But he would have to jump almost like chess squares from here to here. And then these other two little squares, there's one here, and then another one up here. So I'm really looking for abstract light shapes. That's what I'm really looking for. And you can see now that just by drawing those shapes in, it's guiding the eye where I want it to go. Because the eye will go directly there anyway, and it will likely go there as well. And in time, it will go to all of these little places around. But what we actually do want to do, though, is to make the voyeur wish to look further. Otherwise, it just becomes a flat silhouette shape. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that there is so much more that we can do as watercolorists. And that's what I'm hoping this class should develop within us. So try to get the feeling of these rooftops going that way. And then I want you to go back to this building. Remember we drew this one? And I didn't mention it at the time, but it has a sort of twin over here. You see it? Look at that. So if you came through this boulevard into this square, you would have like two buildings either side mirrored. So I'll just draw that one again so you know which one it is. And then try and draw that one. Same height, behind the tree here. If you can squeeze it in. If you can't squeeze it in, well, let's see if you can. Let's see if you can. It's easier just to say, let's squeeze it in. And yeah. And I kind of see a sort of symmetry between this one and that one. That's what I'm aiming for. I don't mind if I nibble a bit away from the tree or these buildings. My mission is to bring these two buildings visually together, like almost like gate posts leading to a field. It's this idea of opening the space. So I got that. And you can see I'm not really too fussed about overly careful detail. I've already got gorgeous shapes on these things. So this is a sort of secondary thing. Although if I could get it looking as lovely, I would. But yeah, that's kind of doing it for me. It's really sort of giving me that feeling. And then you can see that the silhouette of this shape is quite middle value. And then everything at the sort of street level down here is it goes into a haze. A little bit like when we did the temple, you know, the Taj Mahal, although Debjani doesn't think, she told me that it's not likely the Taj Mahal, it's a mosque. So again, I could be I could have been wrong with that, but the point being, the atmosphere of that was hazy, and it's very similar down there on the street level, dusty and hazy. So we've already managed to do that before, and we're going to try and get that going on here. So we nearly completed that. As long as we remember these are the light shapes. And so what I will do is I'll just go over them again, give them a bit more line weight so that I know where they are. And then I'm going to clear off my drawings because in front of these light shapes, there are some amazing finials. So let's just clear those off and I'll point them out to you. So just here, you can see it. This one, I'm going to draw that first. It's got a bell tower type idea as well, and it's got a finial that comes up like so. And it's here. It's actually very close to this little triangle that's on the bottom right. So I follow this idea and I just graft it on. That's how I do. This is how I'm going to achieve a closer sort of feeling of what I'm seeing. So once I've grafted that there, I then draw the sort of cupola idea going up. And it's literally it's bell shapes with another bell shape on the top. And that's going to be a dark silhouette. So that's good. We've got that one in the bag, as they say. But as I've drawn it in front of my roof shapes, you remember the Tom Cruise analogy, I've still got those flat roofs. So what I'm actually doing is I'm now making frames within frames. Okay, so we have this big frame with little episodes of tone. And now as we come forward, we've got detail in front of detail. And in truth, it's as simple as that. And that's how we need to see things, because otherwise you can't see the wood for the trees. But if you look for the big shapes, pick them off, simple geometric shapes, and then when you've got them and you're happy, you can put as much detail as your vent would suggest. And some people are going to be more detailed than others. And it doesn't necessarily mean that a more detailed painting is better. Of course, it's nice to see it, but sometimes less is more. And you have to be the judge of that. So I've got one bell tower there. Let's have a look at this one behind. Now, there is this sort of triangular roof shape. It's very sort of German townhouse. It's got detail within detail. And I'm not so fascinated with that because it's complicated, but you could put it in. I'm more fascinated in this bell tower shape behind because it seems to be an echo of this one. So again, I'm looking at where it sits on my map. And if I were to take let's take red this time, a plumb line through the center of this, you'll see it's in line with the shoulder of the main basilica. So I'm going to bring a line down. Now, of course, if you've got something in the way and it's not panning out for you with that idea, then move it a little bit. I'm sure it'll still work, but I'm going to put it there and I'm going to create my little shape. I'm going to draw this shape there. So it's almost identical. It's not exactly, it's a different one, but it's a similar idea. Almost like a wine bottle. It's like a big wine bottle. Maybe it's aperitivi time. And I could put that little triangular shape in. I will, because I said I wouldn't, but I will. Let's just do it. And then I erase what's in the way, because what I don't want to do is get confused. It's now beginning to go into that area that can be confusing. So when you get to that position in the painting or drawing, you have to be very careful to prescribe which is the dark and which is the light shape. Some people will shade it in a little bit, and if that's you, that's okay. And if you wanted to, you could just do this, a little bit of tone through the dark shape, so you don't get confused. It's just an idea that I've seen many artists do when it gets a little bit complicated, but I think we should be able to manage it. You'll see. So I'll give you a moment to get that area done, because now we have our way into the painting. Believe it or not, we now can see the square. There is a bit more we can do, of course, on the left-hand side here. I'm coming to that next. But is there more that we could do here? Well, perhaps you might see, you know, little abstract shapes. There's another one here, look, another little finial going up. And you might want to put that in. So I'm going to put it in. But remember, it will work at this stage. We have actually got to a point where this will work. What we're adding now, if it can possibly be added to the drawing, whatever you add from this point on is going to sort of gild the lily, as it were. You're going to get more. So whether it improves things, that's a different matter. As I said, it doesn't always improve things to add more detail. You know, the story is already there. What I think I will add, though, which I think would help me, and it might help you, is just, do you see here? There's a dark area here. So I'll do this in yellow, because yellow is probably a good color for a dark area. There it is. It's like a triangle shape with a little bit there. That's got a few little light shapes in. So when I'm going to give you a strategy for putting these sort of lighter shapes in as we paint. But for now, pay it no attention other than, you know, noticing that, oh yeah, there is more in there. But if I just draw that dark shape, it's like a triangle here. There it is. I now have everything I need on the right-hand side. I don't need any more than that. Seriously, that's sufficient, I believe. So where does that take us? Well, I'll give you a moment because I know that you'll be drawing this area. Now we will then go on to the left-hand side and we'll just adopt a similar strategy, but I'll give you a minute or so, minute or two, because that's a lot of stuff there to do. Okay, right. So I'm going to clear off all of those wine bottles that I've drawn on there. And sometimes it is, I know I joke about these things, but it is a good idea to see things differently, because drawing buildings really difficult for some people. So drawing a wine bottle, it's not so difficult. And if you're one of those people who find it's easier to see it as a wine bottle, then that's a good idea. So what I'm doing here is exactly what I did here. Remember, I sort of abstract this shape. It's like a side of the roof there. Over here, I see another perspective line. And this again is sort of leading the eye into the square, believe it or not. It's doing the same thing for us. It's going to bring the eye through like an arrow, focusing through these points to that gate there, the arch, to lead us in. So what we need is to find with our knitting needle, or we need to point to the arch through that sort of finial thing, and we need an angle. And this is what I think the angle is there. That is about 16 minutes to the hour. Something like that. Once you've got that angle, then we craft onto that this very odd looking shape. It's got 5 sides. And, you know, if I have to sort of move things around a bit, I will. But this is going to give me a light wall, or the plane of a building that's hitting the light. This one's probably the most trickiest shape. But you've already drawn part of that shape, because it was the shape that led your eye to this thing here, partly part of it anyway. And if I have to change it a little bit, I will. But so far it seems okay. So there it is. And I would treat this in the same way as if I were painting in a garden with a wall, and I see a ray of sunlight hitting a shape on a wall, and sometimes you get these sort of strange sort of almost like rectangles or diagonal shapes. It's a similar thing, but on a bigger scale. And of course, there are dark shapes in front of that, breaking it up. But for now, I've got a light space. I know that's going to be light when I come to paint. Is there anything else? Well, yes, there is. So going back to Tom Cruise again, there's a flat, almost a flat roof shape here. This kind of reminds me, maybe it's a train station. It's got a sort of a huge light shape there, and then there's something standing in front of it, but almost like a parallelogram. And it's again similar kind of angle to this, not quite the same, but it straight there, and then goes away from us. And when the shape goes away from us, we know that the angles will converge like a train track. You know, they're going to come together. Does that make sense? And that again is a light shape. So that's the sun hitting the top of that roof. And I'll reserve that as a light shape. Now, there are other little light shapes here and there. You could draw them in, you could go on forever, but I got a feeling now we are very close. So the last shape I'm going to give you that's very light is this shape here. And again, it's a sort of parallelogram. Remember when we did this, the gecko building? It's sitting on the gecko's back. It's a little parallelogram. And it's full of chimneys and things. And as long as I remember that that's a light shape, I can have fun with that later when I'm painting by putting chimneys on it. And there we are. That is enough. That is probably more than enough, but it's where I'm going to leave it. Now, if you are somebody who loves the detail, of course, I'm going to have a break now for 5 minutes, but if you really want to put more detail in, if you wanted to put these, I think that is a train station by the look of it, but you could put that building there. It looks kind of like a submarine, doesn't it? There you go. Or you could put this one in down here if you want to. It's up to you. Like I say, I prefer the less is, believe it or not, I prefer less is more, but I realize I've done a lot here with you. But there it is. That is my drawing. It's ready, I think, to go into paint. So I'm going to pause briefly for 5 minutes. So I'll see you after the break. Now, and just move this over a little bit. I'm going to share the original photograph because I still think it's better than the value map. So let's see if I can share that. Here it is. Oh. Here it goes. Just move this one out of the way. Bring this one forward. Okay, so hopefully you can see my palette there. Just about, I think. If I just pull this in, yeah, you can see it. Okay, so I'm going to use, as I mentioned, sepia. So I've got neutral tint here and sepia. They're going to be my browns and dark brown. But for the lighter area here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use raw sienna because it's got that golden glow. So I'm going to mix something up now. I'm just going to use a round size 12 brush. So it's sort of a medium to large brush.
And John, sorry to interrupt. Just checking if we haven't got sepia, it's burnt umber instead.
Yeah, burnt umber.
Yeah.
It will supply a very similar tone.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. So here goes. So this will be a tea mixture. So plenty of water. and it wants to be kind of light, which it will be. So I'm going to use my Hakey brush. Oh, it's dirty. Hadn't realized it was still dirty. Try that again. So raw sienna, tea wash. Just going to bring this through. Now, as you put the color through, of course, we want to give a feeling of the space, the depth, the warmth, the tone. Now, as I bring this through, I'm thinking, well, perhaps I could add either a little bit of pink, which I've got here, or indeed burnt sienna, which will supply some of that warmth that we're seeing. But pink is how I'm going to go for it, because I just think that the pink is nicer in the light. And then I'll bring this through to the foreground. Now, it's always a good idea to have on standby a little bit of paper towel, because we will want to lift out some of the very bright lights in the square and on that roof. So as I bring this paint through into the foreground area, and that's what I've done now, I will go in with this and lift out this area here and this area there. So just here and there. Now, on the camera, it may not even pick up, but that now, therefore, is slightly lighter. Okay. Hope that's clear. Any issues, just let me know. Now, I'm working flat on a table, so I have to be careful a little bit. But in my next mix, I'm going to add sepia. And I'm hoping to make this coffee thickness, so it's a little bit darker than the light. So I want it somewhere in this sort of spectrum of tone here. This is my value strip, so I'm going to make it similar to this. Now remember that this will dry slightly lighter than it appears in the mix. So where does this go? Well, this can go literally, it really depends on how wet your paper got in the first instance. But mine is, well, it's still quite wet, but I can just test here and there. I'm going to start off with those not radio masts, chimneys and spires that are in the distance, putting a little bit of tone, and then just see how it pans out. If it's obviously too dark, then add a bit more water to your mix and maybe wait a little bit of time. Or if you're using, you could use a hairdryer. I'm also going to bring this through my main structures. You see, I don't hang around. I'm just going to go straight into all of my main structures. I'll put this up there so we can see it a bit more clearly. There it is. And if I do feel, which sometimes you will, that there's some raw sienna notes in some of these barrel shapes, then of course you don't have to paint all of it with the next tone, just parts of it. But as you can see, I'm bringing this down now. Now, when I get to my tree, I am going to remember that my tree is casting a shadow across the square, you see? So, and there's probably more trees than one. You can see other sort of slightly diagonal shaped shadows crossing the street and over the square.
Excuse me, John, is this all sepia?
Yeah, this is all sepia and it's a coffee thickness belt.
Okay.
And you can see already that I'm getting a bit of distance in the background. Because I'm painting wet into wet, what I can afford to do now is go back in a little bit and sort of weave some other little structures. Remember I said to you at the beginning, I don't have to draw everything because I can paint what I can see as well. And so look, I just invent little, and this is all coffee thickness, little points of color, sometimes flat shapes, sometimes long, thin shapes. Doesn't really matter as long as I don't paint everything. That's the important thing. Don't have to paint everything that's in that horizon area, because if I do, it'll go flat. So now I'm bringing, and it's still all sepia, it's still coffee thickness. I'm only really worried about one thing, painting into my light shapes. And I know that that's my square, this triangular roof, and these places where I've put Tom Cruise and he's going to tell me, don't paint in there. So that's how I sort of play it. I always have a bit of fun making up silly stories, but there's a reason. And the reason is I don't want to go into that area. I know what they are. Now, some artists, what they will do is they'll use masking fluid, which is, that's not a bad idea. But if you're painting, which we will be doing mostly when we're on holiday, without masking fluid, we'll be painting plein air, on plein air. We need a different strategy. We actually need to think quickly and have a sort of a method to bring us safely through the scene, as it were. And so my angle on that is sometimes I make up silly stories because a painting is a story. But you can see now as I bring these shapes together, it's already beginning to have some kind of an impact already. Now, I remember that, again, talking about Tom Cruise, I know it's silly, but that shape there is a roof that I cannot paint into. It's the light shape. So I'm mixing up some more coffee thickness. If I go a little bit darker, it doesn't matter. But what does matter is I don't go into that shape. Now, I do remember that there's a side street and that goes through and connects to the next part of the city. So I've done that. That's okay. And I'm going to keep that little triangular shape there. And do you see what happens if you're working in this method and you're thinking your way through? You arrive safely, ready to go over to this side. Before I do that, though, remember the Indian scene by the mosque or wherever that was. We created this fuzzy, soft edge. So just with a wet brush, just soften that shadow out there into this street below. That's good. So we've got our square. Now I'm going to move across to the left-hand side. On the left-hand side, I do know that the dark shapes are here. I can paint those in. Now, don't forget, I am going to go darker anyway than this, but this just helps me to set my scene. I've got the gecko's back. There it is. And then I'm going to go upwards towards that shape there. Remember, there's this very bizarre parallel type shape, which is the wall. And I'm going to link that through now. And even if I connect what looks like now my dark shapes, it doesn't matter. They are not my dark shapes at all. They're just shapes that are not light as this. And as long as I remember that, that's good for now. That's all I need to do. So I just connect around, again, this little shape I've created here, which again, I'm talking about Tom Cruise's launch pad. He's going to be standing on that roof. Oh, I did a submarine thing there, so I'll paint that. But all of these silly ideas that I've got have helped me now to bring my second wash successfully through my vista. And of course, in the second wash, this is a great place to begin to think about jewelry. Aha. Some of the ladies will like that, but maybe. But the idea of the jewelry is really to do with creating a level of interest, not just basic shapes, but little things like people in that square. Like I was saying, there might be a horse and cart, and there might be a few people getting to the bakers before everyone's had the best bread. All the important things in life are happening in that square right now. People are moving off. Maybe there's a train driver. He's got to get to the train station. And there they are. I've just put them in, some little dots. Now I've got their dots. I can dry my brush a little bit. It's a bit of pigment there. And then I can do a diagonal shadow just to convey more depth to the jewelry. So there it is. That's working. Now you can have jewelry inside the shadow as well, because if you look, there's some little posts in there as well in the real photograph. So you would just have to add a little bit more paint, not a lot, but just a little bit. And I can add a couple of people down here, because there's going to be people moving to work, getting around. And there we are. Wonderful. So that's a little bit of jewelry on the street level. There can be jewelry in other places. For example, if we look at these beautiful domes, we can start to put little lines, dots. If it's not too wet, see how wet it is. If it's very, very wet, leave it alone. But if you can start to put some more marks within while we're still in this coffee thickness tone. For example, remember this area here, we have these lines. At the moment, they're pencil lines, but I can paint over a pencil line pretty quickly. There's also those wonderful portals that's sitting on the side of the church there. There's a couple of sculptures or statues. So I can put those on. I'm sure there'll be a statue here and there. So I just play with my brush. And this is where I have fun trying to create marks that really create the jewelry. That you can't draw these marks so easily as to paint. And that's one of the gifts that we've got as watercolorists. May not feel like it every time you paint, but you do have this gift because your brush allows you to make subtle marks, little points. Sometimes you use the tip, sometimes you use the sort of blade of the brush. And you can twist the brush, some people flick the brush. There's all sorts of things that you can do with that brush that you can't necessarily do with the pencil so easily. So you can have almost like a second go with this tone now. Now, of course, if you're not using sepia and you're using your burnt umber, it's the same. You might want to just, as you're putting the color in, like what I'm doing here, I know that's a domino shape. It's got a little window, so I can draw the window shape there and leave a hole. And then I can just sort of paint around it. But I don't always fill in everything. That's one of the, again, it's one of the gifts that watercolors gives us sometimes. And you'll notice this with the really good watercolorists. They tend to be older watercolorists as well. They might have by this point in their career a little bit of shake in their hand. You know, that really helps because you don't always fill in all of the space and you create these little dry marks. Try to see if you can create little episodes where there's textures by not filling in all of the shapes. And that is another gift that watercolors gives to watercolorists. You don't get it in other media. And if you need somebody to inspire you, have a look at William Turner's watercolors from, I think it's called the fifth. There's 5 different collections of watercolors from the different periods of Turner's life. And the 5th one is like when he's an old man. And these are the best ones, in my estimation, because he has abandoned the perfect line. And he does what I'm doing now. He sort of goes around making little abstract shapes with the brush. And then it starts to feed into the overall effect. Okay. So I hope that's helped you. Other areas of jewelry, you can start to put chimneys in, you know, the little chimneys down here. And if you really wanted to change brush, which I know it's tempting, get a smaller brush out, you can do, you know, small brush will make smaller chimneys. That's the logic. And but whenever you put a chimney in, so for example, if I start to put a chimney in here and a chimney there, I will also create this diagonal raking shadow. Try to keep that the same. You see that? I just let it go into that direction. And all of a sudden, these now become chimney pots. Some of them might be wider, but they will still have that shadow. I hope that makes sense, because each value that we push in, and we've got 5 values to do, this is our second value, by the way. Each time we put a value in, we're going to have an opportunity to put jewelry into our painting. And that's how I like to see it, because it's the jewelry that can take over from detail. Because you can see now, I've just created this little area here, and it's already starting to feel like detail. I never drew it, I just painted it because it's easier for me to do that. I put a few chimneys over here. Wherever you feel that you need to put some chimneys, please feel free to put them in. Because we're making a model. That's the other thing I forgot to say this week. And the model has to tell the story of this city. And, well, it will do. It's going to tell the story. But we can have a short story, you know, or we can have a very long, drawn-out story. And it doesn't really matter. Now, today, I'm going to be putting in chimneys in this value, like I'm doing now. And then in the next value, I'll put some more chimneys in and more little details on the roofs. I won't ever be able to get all of the details in, and I'm not even looking for exact details. I'm making them up. Honestly, it's just from my imagination. But if I look at the photograph, I get a feeling of them. And if I put some in this value and then some in the next value and continue that way, I should have enough. So you see what I've done, created a little bit of, I'm not overdoing it in this particular value. I don't want to. You could, but there's no need to. We're now almost ready to travel into the next value, which will be milky thickness. Okay. But before I do
John,
that,
sorry,
yes,
may I just ask a question? I'm a bit behind, so I missed. Have you actually outlined some of those buildings with paint, or is that just your pencil mark?
that's just a pencil mark.
Okay, it just looks so strong. I missed it, and I thought, have you outlined it, or is it okay? That's fine.
Yeah, it still depends. That's a good question, Victoria. I'm still using, believe it or not, this is coffee thickness, and I'm just going in. So, for example, this building here, I can see a little bell tower there. I've already painted it in coffee, but I could go over it again like now to put some jewelry into it. So I am. I'm just going to put a couple of little windows, but I haven't actually painted an outline. It's the pencil.
Okay,
So
yeah,
it just shows you how thin this paint is. It's actually very thin. Although you would only know when the next layer goes on, because as with every contrast that we put on, our eyes focus on that particular depth and we see it as a dark against a light, whereas actually all of this is very light at the moment. Okay, so
thank you.
no worries. My pleasure. I could also put a little bit of shadow on the left-hand side of the tree with some texture, so I will while I'm at this stage. But at some point, I've got to give way to the next value. So the next value is literally, for those using sepia, a milky thickness sepia wash. So this is a bit stronger. So I'm looking now for my middle value, this one here, not as dark as the next value, somewhere in the middle. If you're using burnt umber, I would suggest make the burnt umber a bit thicker and add a little bit of neutral tint or black, just a little bit. So where does this paint go into? Well, this paint can go into this zone here. So on the photograph, you'll see that the square remember, is sort of enclosed in this value here. That's our middle value. So if I paint that in now, you'll see it looks very dark. And you might be terrified to use it that dark, but don't fear, it will be fine. So all of this area here is going to have this tone. Even there's an archway there. It's going to bring me into the square. I've got a shadow from there. There we go. Looks very dark, I know, but once you start to put this throughout the middle ground and the foreground, it won't look dark for very long, you'll see. So I'm bringing that through now. It's also going to go into this building here. Notice I'm already knitting jewelry into it. You see, I saw those little sort of crenulations around the top of the sort of belt of the building. So I put that in. I'm having a bit of fun there, making some little textures. I'm going to carry this over now onto the right hand side. Into my tree. Tree's getting quite a bit of tone. Now, as I come to the main structure of the basilica here, what I'm doing is I'm looking now for the darker tones, and I'm putting these into what I'm calling a milky thickness. It's milky thickness. And this is a stage where I always say that halfway through the painting, it can look terrible. The painting can look terrible. And this is where you have to trust the process. So I'm just knitting it all together. Now, I'm looking at the photograph and I do see there's some light episodes within this sort of middle value. Of course, it looks dark because, as I said before, as soon as you put a contrast on top of a previous contrast, it will look darker and you'll think, oh, that's really dark. But don't worry, we can go much darker because your browns can go creamy, they can go buttery. And if you're only at milky thickness, which is what this is, how do you know it's milky? Well, when you put your brush through it, you'll still see some of the white of the ceramic or plastic or the tin or whatever it is you're using. You'll still see it. If you don't see any of the white, then you're creamy. It's gone to creamy, and yeah, that's when you got to be careful. Now, what I'd like to be is very careful here when I'm putting my details around these oculi and these little windows and these lines. What I tend to do is, as I put that in, which I've just done, I will soften them. Because if I don't do it now, I'll be stuck with a hard edge there, and that's not what I want. So you'll see me, I'll just go quiet as I attend to these details. So I squeeze my brush, and then I just soften the edge by patting them with the damp brush. That's how it's my easiest trick. There are other ways. You can spray it. That always leaves a possibility of some really subtle tones, but if you're not sure, just do what I did. You saw what I did. I just sort of softened it. And I carry on down. Now remember, Tom Cruise is still waiting on those roofs, so you don't paint into there if you can help it. If you do paint in there by accident, just lift it out, and hopefully you won't disturb the previous level too much. So now as I come forward to the rooftops, I'm being a bit careful not to paint into those white areas. And if you've ever done printmaking, which is very similar to this method, because what we're doing is we're framing each of the light episodes with a darker episode. That's what we're doing. We're framing it, which is like stained glass windows. You very often I'll be saying things like, you're adding the frame, the lead frame in the stained glass window, because that's kind of what it's a little bit like. And that, of course, is contrast. That's where you will create the depth. But we are very careful not to paint into those light shapes. Yeah, so that was good. We did very well. We didn't paint into them. Not yet. But we can put jewelry in there. Even in this stage, as I said, we're now into milky thickness. So milky thickness, we can put little shapes, chimneys. There's lots of them on that roof because I've saved the light shape. And even though, you know, it may not be obvious to the voyeur what they're looking at, their mind's eye would just go, oh, it's roof. That's a roof. That's chimneys. Because that's how things work. It's very psychological, and we don't need to worry. It will take care of itself. So I've done my, oh, I haven't done this one. Almost done the right hand side. I'm going to move over to the left hand side any moment now. So moving across the street, I have to be very careful not to paint into my square. That's a must not do. I've got my finial. I'm going to paint that. Halfway through that shape. And then I cross over here. There are some, there is the gecko shape for the building with the bright roof. So I paint into that. That's an easy one to do. I like the easy ones. The easy ones, they just give you more time to think. So I'll be putting that in. And then I have to then go over here into this labyrinth of light and dark shapes. So I'll make plenty of paint up because I will need more paint. I'm only dealing with one color, sepia. If you're dealing with burnt umber and a little bit of black, obviously be careful you don't go too strong with the black. So now I'm going to draw some abstract shapes into here. And the real important thing is I don't paint that shape, and for goodness sakes, not this shape. All the rest, if I mess up a little bit in there, no one will know because it's darks and it's all connected. But while I'm painting these darks, which I'm going to do now, you can see within those darks, there are some lighter shapes. So you can have fun exploring that. And you can see as I weave it together, it's starting to create more depth. That's what we're about. Okay. So I lock this shape in. Remember, that's that shape there. It's the opposite of that. For now, it just disappears. Very often, when you're doing the process correctly, which means that you're following the values correctly, shapes will just disappear like that one. It was on and now it's gone. Well, it'll come back. You'll see. It'll come back next go. But for now, I'm just going to put some jewelry in, some chimneys. And I'm having fun. Just trying to remember where I'm going. Where I'm not going is the most important thing. I'm not going into that light shape there. And there we are. Connecting it all together. And it seems to be working. Already there is some good a good feeling of depth, and that's locking together nicely. I didn't do the little bell tower on top of this church here, so I'll put that in. And then I just check out things in the background as well, because it's not too late. If something starts to dry too much and you think, oh, I could just do a half tone in there, I could add a little bit of water to this. And there's no reason why I can't just go, while I've still got a little bit of the tone, I can make certain things stand out a bit more. I noticed that this dome here, for example, it's lighter than its background. So that's when I can just sketch in a few little abstract shapes. And that helped. So it's not as if at this point you can't go back into things. You can. So that's important to know as well. But you don't want to be doing too much of that, because it could be that you upset the value map. It could be, but I doubt it. As long as if you go back into things, you thin the paint a little bit. So there we go. We have now put in our middle value. So that's great, because it means that we can go a little bit stronger now. So we go creamy thickness. So how do you know when it's creamy thickness? Well, do you see, as I put the paint on, you don't actually see through it so much. You have to sort of stir the brush to see through it. It also sticks to the plastic more, which, yeah, so that's how I know. So where do I go with this? Well, straight away, I'm going to go into this area here. For some reason, that's quite dark. So I just go in while it's a little bit wet, and I'll add a shape. I'm also going to pretend that this building here is a sort of a spire, because I can see a sort of a triangle shape. So I paint around that. That's helped. And then I'm going to paint this block that it's attached to. Remember, we sort of put it on a plinth. That church is on a plinth. So I create the plinth again. So as I paint these tones in, what's actually really occurring is I'm now adding more depth to the middle ground and the foreground. It's going to be. So I'm being very selective where I see this. So remember I said there was a kind of a submarine thing? That's very dark. So I can paint into there. And I'm painting some shapes to link. that submarine shape to the side wall that I was talking about with Tom Cruise. And there is within that side wall some geometric shapes. So I'm going to put those in, and they have a shadow going down the side diagonally. So I'll put that in and a few more. And then using that creamy paint, I'm now going to put some darks down into there. There's a wall I can see here that needs some more depth. So you kind of analyze where you've been, and you're putting more darks. That's how I'm going to deal with it. And then back to my gecko building, that is always darker than anything else because it's in the foreground. So I'll add more paint there. Accidentally picked up a bit of black, but it doesn't matter. So I'm going over that again. So you notice I keep painting over certain areas more than once. And that is because obviously I'm trying to stay true to the value map, the process, but also it's good practice to do that. You don't have to paint, the other 3 tones underneath that dark. That dark would be dark anyway with that color there, that thickness. But it doesn't hurt. So it's good practice to do it that way, whatever. And now I've got that gecko building done. Then I can move sideways like this. Remember this building that I said, if you're doing it correctly, it will disappear. Well, it's now going to come forward again, because now what's going to happen, I'm going to create its layers. And it's got several tiers to it, layers that get taller and thinner as it climbs. Like so. And I'm not opposed to be putting a little bit of jewelry onto it. And now it's standing out. It looks very, very much bigger. And then I'll do the same with the building opposite it, because that should also be very similar in value, similar space, similar light. There it is. So those two are sort of coming forward. And then the next building, I do kind of make them up now, I have to admit. But as this building comes down, I see it's dropping down into the street level. It's got some windows. And then in front of that, there is the building that I called the wine bottle. That, well, it's got lots of detail to it. And I'm putting some windows, you see that? Going into sort of a diagonal angle like so. And that's also bringing it forward. Then my next building. Running out of paint again, so I'll quickly make some more creamy thickness. Now, creamy thickness is about 75% paint, 25% water. That's another way to see creamy thickness. So that's coming forward. Got the side street, which is also very dark. Like so. And then this area here, remember we drew this sort of triangular shape. This area has a lot of depth. It's almost as if there's a street down there as well. So there we go. I put in that darker shape. That's helped. And then last but not least, I'm going to paint into this wine bottle shape. So this one is has a little finial, and then it goes downwards. It's got so many details, but with the brush, you see, you can summon detail quite easily just by fashioning the movement of your brush. So that looks like a dome now, and I didn't really have to do a lot to achieve that. But the previous tone is just right for the lighter part on the building. So I don't paint that. I paint the window shape. There's another window there, so I paint that. And then we join that to the shadow shape of the side of the building, like so. And we're almost there. We just need a few more chimney pots. Gonna have these going in a line. And this one here with the onion shape. As I paint its onion, I'm looking for the there's like some little lines on it. There's actually some details almost that you can see. So I try to paint that. Yeah, that's feeling better. And then I come back over to here and I'm going to paint in with this creamy thickness, some shadows on the chimneys. We painted a few chimneys at the beginning. And I kind of weave them together with some, looks like random lines. I guess it could look like that, but there are also repeat lines of walls, angles, which I think I'm seeing. And I have a good look and see if I feel that I've captured most of what I'm seeing, and pretty happy with feeling of depth. But there's always room for improvement. Now, as this has started to dry, I'm noticing that this is not quite as dark as I wanted it. I like some of the detail, but I could add a little bit of water to the mix. And I could just now go back in and see if I can redress some of the areas I feel it's lacking a little bit of its depth there. So I'll go in again. So I am, and I always do that if I feel it needs it. This is glazing. There's also some little windows down here, so I can put those in. And you'll probably find yourself putting in other little details. And this is where, when we start to look at somebody like Turner, he probably didn't put so much detail as this scene. And to be fair, he didn't necessarily paint anything as detailed as this scene that I can think of. But when he painted Venice, he would very often frame and frame and frame. And that's kind of what we're doing. We are framing as we're coming forward. So look for areas where it goes maybe flat. So for example, I've got my square here. And on this side, it's framed. But on this side, that needs more tone. It's not framing the square. So again, I just put a little bit of water on the brush, pick up a little bit of paint, and have another go. And you see what's happening now? It's framed the square much better. So now I'm happier with that. And when we isolated that light shape, it is the lightest shape on the left-hand side. So these light shapes are too light, so I can paint over them a little bit, do you see? To knock them back a little bit in their strength. Same maybe goes for some of the shapes up here. And now this one is taking precedence again. It's the strongest shape. So that's good. I'm happier now. I lift a little bit there, which I didn't mean to put in. Anything else? Well, maybe a few more little textures here and there. And this is where you'll have fun, I hope. Just bringing little things in, which on the second viewing, you'll start to maybe see. And it's just another chance to bring in something else. And there we are. I think I've got what I was after. I could spend probably, a good half an hour, maybe even an hour, putting out more little bits. But really, if I was outside painting on holiday and I had a vista, I very often paint Florence. Florence is very similar to this. You've got the big basilica. You can see it from the rose garden. And I treat it exactly the same way. I think that if you've managed this one, you could manage Florence. Imagine putting this city into Italy. Oh my goodness, in that light. But really, all I'm trying to think of is how can I improve this further? I would probably, if I was in Florence, I would be happy now. I would want to go to have a little drink somewhere, maybe just to relax a bit more. This was what I was after. If I wanted to paint it in the studio, I could get really fussy and start to put every little tiny detail in. But would it make it better? I don't know. I think I got what I wanted. So there's one last thing I'm going to do now, and that's to use buttery thickness paint. So what's that? Well, that's the dark accent. So this is where I just use neat paint and a little bit of neutral tint. So it's almost going to a very dark black brown. And for this, I would really need to know where to put it. So I'll get the value map back up and you will be able to see it because it's only a few areas. Here and here. So just on the value map, it's only here in the sort of foreground there, in that corner, just in there. So I just put a little bit there, a little bit on the edge of this little bell tower here. And that's brought it forward. And then the last thing I'm going to do, I just think that that's gone flat again. Now I've had a bit more time on it. So I'm just going to put a bit more paint in there because I'd like that to come forward. And that, just putting a little bit in, you see how I did it? I just dotted it in just to bring the focus back there. And I'll do the same here on this center band, because what happens with contre-jour, particularly contre-jour, is when you've got rounded forms like tubular or bell-like shapes or oranges, anything that's spherical, the light starts to bounce in at the sides. But this bit that's a adjacent to the paint, the viewer is going to be darker and deeper. So that's why I just put a little bit more there. Sometimes it also transpires into the dome as well. So I put a little bit there and up there and up there. And then we probably, I hope, have got what we were trying to achieve. Let's have a little look. So I'll stop the share. In fact, I'll just focus on the painting. Let's see if I can just new share. There it is. Zoom in. How do I get the zoom in? That's the zoom in. That's too far. That's it there. So now I can kind of see that. Yeah. It's it is possible just to pull that shape there forward by framing it a little bit with some light tones. And I think on the whole, that's it. I've captured the feeling of the light in the square. That's what I wanted. Got my tree. And I've got the feeling of the depth on the side leading the eye. So yeah, that's it. Got it. I'm going to stop the share there. And let's see how you've done.